as far as influences are concerned, I I have to think about that because they're extremely varied and diverse. But I probably have mentioned this before, but I do feel that my father was one of my biggest or my first influence musically without me even realizing it. So just growing up with a with an older parent who was very into music and very much present, and then by the time I got into playing guitar and whatnot, he was passing on all this Cuban music, and because it's coming from my father, I kind of dismissed it. Right, when you're a kid, you don't really you dismiss your parents essentially until you realize that what they're saying is of great value. So he definitely molded the way that I currently respond to music, or my paradigm essentially. So those influences were um, Irakere, Billie Holiday, Tchaikovsky, Glenn Miller. So a really good mix of really passionate romantic Russian stuff and really powerful rhythmic blazing Cuban music, as well as feeling, um, which is style of Cuban trova type of music where it's just traditionally it's just guitar and voice, and it's very rich harmonically. Pablo Milanés, and of course Billie Holiday, and so that I was exposed to American jazz and Cuban music, and I was born in Cuba, but I studied music in the United States. So I essentially I didn't really study Cuban music in the conservatory and at New World School of the Arts because it was all American music, and and of course there's Cuban influences in there. Uh, we for example something that comes to mind is Duke Ellington. So in big band in high school we played a lot of Duke Ellington competitions. We actually entered in the Essentially Ellington High School Jazz Band competition. And so we were going through a lot of these songs, and one of them, "The Peanut Vendor," that's obviously a Cuban tune, but Duke Ellington had an arrangement. So indirectly, Cuban music or Cuban influences, Caribbean influences, are so much a part of North American music that sometimes it's easy to forget that, So indirectly, I've always been a very diverse musician because that's just the way that it was presented to me in the beginning without any distinctions. This is all music. So that's very much how I feel about my even how I compose. I compose music for so many different types of applications and genres where through technology and sitting in front of a computer, I've been able to have all of the freedom in the world to like any kind of music and to try to create it because I have the freedom technically and technologically to do it. So I'm very much into electronic music, and I'm very much into rock and whatever else. Growing up, the guitar was very popular because of the grunge movement and all of the heavy metal bands that I was into as a kid. So that's also part of it. And then my interest as a film composer, I literally have had to study so many different kinds of music that I don't necessarily perform or even want to perform, but I still have to get in there and do it justice, and I really don't see much of a distinction between any of these styles in terms of their execution. They're all very very particular and specific onto themselves. So this I know it's very common, unfortunately, for many musicians, classical jazz musicians specifically. I think due to the school structure that they have been exposed to and programmed by, that they say, oh, this is what I do. I only do this kind of music. I'm a jazz guitar player, or I'm a classical pianist. And I don't feel that way about music. I feel that I'm a musician and I'm a guitarist, and I have played classical music. I've played classical guitar. I've played blues, rock, whatever it is, jazz, and I compose classical music. I've written for orchestras. I have a string quartet. I've written, you know, four on the floor, kind of down tempo, produced music like this, all kinds of stuff. I just recently wrote a kind of a timba influenced song that one of my best friends, Marley Gilbert, is writing lyrics to in English. So I'm trying to mix a Cuban sentiment, very rhythmic and very, how would you say, bright and danceable, but with American lyrics, you know. So my influences are all over the place, you know. But what's most important to me is to come across as a complete musician, not just a pigeonholing me into one genre, you know. And with the access that we all have to technology, I also feel that has played a major role in my influences and how diverse they've become, and also how diverse my work base is, because I have my own studio. I've taught myself engineering, and we never reach a level where we feel comfortable in anything. So we're always students and we're always learning, but because of my dedication over the last 10 years and sacrifice, and instead of buying really expensive guitars, I invested money into my studio to buy gear and to learn how to, taking lessons from engineers and whatever else, acquiring microphones, acquiring cables, acquiring microphone stands. You know, I'm still playing the same guitars I've had since I was a kid. They're amazing instruments. You know, I mean, of course, I would love to have a luthier make me a nice 7-string, you know, handmade with all the nice trims and whatever I want. But is it necessary? For me, what's most important is to be able to produce my music, and I think that to be on a competitive level in the music industry, you not only need to be able to play your instrument at a very high level and to make a living at it, but you also need to be able to compose and to see your music come to fruition. So that means that if you don't have a studio, you're going to be very limited, because then you're going to be seeking out funds from sources to try to record something. Then you're dependent on a studio. Then you're dependent on the engineer. You may not even like what he did, and you don't know how to articulate it. So you end up falling far behind, and you can't even produce the amount of music that you think you have the potential to produce, because you have all these limitations. Whereas if you actually have technical knowledge on studio techniques and recording and whatever else, modern production processes, then you won't have those limitations. So that's also part of why I've been able to maintain such a diverse base of influences and output, because I think because of technology and my interest in delving into the music production process.